1815, Toulon, France. The film opens with a majestic shot of the stormy sea, as an army of prisoners toil in pulling a massive ship into the dock. Among these prisoners is Jean Valjean, a man with a haunted look in his eyes, sentenced to 19 years of hard labor for stealing a loaf of bread and multiple escape attempts. Overseeing the prisoners is Inspector Javert, a strict and unyielding officer of the law. He observes the prisoners indifferently as they keep singing and pulling. As the prisoners sing about their pains and suffering, Valjean grows increasingly bitter, with the desperation in his eyes visible, probably butchering a few of the cold-hearted inspectors in his head. Javert singles out Valjean, ordering him to retrieve a fallen flag, a cruel task that Valjean struggles to do. He grunts as he lifts the heavy log on his shoulders and begins to drag. He then drops the flag at the feet of Javert, who reveals that Valjean has been granted parole. However, he will always be a prisoner in the eyes of the law. Defensive, Valjean reveals that he had only stolen a loaf of bread to save the life of his sister's child, who was on the verge of demise. But an unmoved Javert is nonchalant about this information, and believes that Valjean's crime and status as a thief would always follow him like an identity. He refuses to call Valjean by his name but rather by his prisoner number, and relishes how aggravated Valjean gets when he refers to him as 24601. Other prisoners return to their cells, but Valjean walks unsteadily out as Javert watches. Valjean, now a free man, still can't shake off the feeling of the chains he wore as a slave. Having been locked away unjustly for 19 years, Valjean hopes all the authorities that stole his life never find peace, as he now has to relearn the meaning of liberty. With his staff in his hands, Valjean goes job hunting. To his dismay, Javert was not wrong about how being an ex-convict would be his identity. Valjean is shunned and mistreated wherever he goes. No one wants to hire the ex-convict. It's torture for him, as he is informed by an officer that he will be on parole forever, and if he fails to report, he will be immediately arrested. He is in fact tagged as a dangerous man. More and more problems follow the poor man. He can't get shelter as he sleeps in the cold and scavenges for food. Desperate and destitute, Valjean finds refuge in the home of a kind bishop. The bishop, who finds the poor man lying around his home, is quick to offer him food and shelter without question. The bishop leads him inside, and they share a meal. In the darkness of night, Valjean succumbs to his desperation and steals the bishop's silverware. The next day, he is caught and brought back by the police. They claim Valjean stole from the bishop and lied that the bishop gifted him the silverware. To everyone's astonishment, specifically Valjean's, instead of condemning him, the bishop confirms that the silverware indeed is a gift, and adds 2 silver candlesticks to the collection. The bishop dismisses the officers, and when they leave, he politely advises Valjean to use the pieces of silverware to become an honest man. Overwhelmed by the bishop's mercy and kindness, Valjean decides to break his parole and start a new life. He throws away his yellow passport in an act of defiance. It is now 1823. 8 years later, Valjean changes his identity and has become Monsieur Madeleine, a rich factory owner and the mayor of Montreuil-sur-Mer. His factory employs many workers, including Fantine, a young woman who secretly sends money to her illegitimate daughter, Cosette. Cosette, however, lives with the Thénardiers, unscrupulous innkeepers. However, Fantine's secret is exposed by her jealous co-workers. Under immense pressure from the factory women, Fantine faces the threat of dismissal by the factory foreman, regardless of her pleas. Things take a turn for the worse when, out of anger and frustration, Fantine hits the factory foreman across the face. This single act seals her fate, leading to her being thrown out of the factory. She desperately yells for mercy from the mayor, but Monsieur Madeleine has bigger concerns to deal with at the moment. The mayor and Javert have crossed paths once more, and anxiety is evident on Valjean's face. He struggles to remain composed as he approaches the inspector. They chat briefly, and the inspector pledges to be at the mayor's service. Just then, Monsieur Madeleine's presence is urgently needed outside as a man is being crushed under his cart. He hurries to help the poor man, bending down and struggling to lift the weight off the overwhelmed man. At that moment, Javert is struck with déjà vu. For some reason, the whole scenario reminds him of a particular someone. As he watches the mayor lift the weight off the helpless man on the floor, Javert is stunned. He can't seem to comprehend how and why a man of the mayor's age could be that strong. The inspector doesn't have enough boldness to express his speculation, though, and so he takes his leave. On the other hand, Fantine is in dire straits to provide for her daughter, and so she decides to sell Cosette's jewelry. She meets a buyer, but his price for it is rather insulting to the value of the jewel. Suddenly, she is surrounded by a large number of prostitutes. It turns out that the place that she came to is a red light area. Amid all the drama, Fantine is offered a price for her hair. A bit random and preposterous at first, the mere thought of selling her hair to a stranger was mind-bumbling. However, when she's offered a tempting amount of 10 francs for it, she is now left to reconsider. 10 francs would pay her debt. It could be just enough to save her daughter Cosette. Fantine agrees and is in tears as her hair is being shaved off. Not only do desperation and poverty put a price tag on her hair, but her teeth as well, and then her body. She soon becomes part of the group of prostitutes, and now has her first encounter with a man as one. After her first dreadful moment of intimacy with a man, now being labeled a promiscuous woman, Fantine soliloquizes, singing of her lost innocence and shattered hopes. She reflects on the harsh realities of her life. One night, Fantine, who is gravely ill, is harassed by an customer and fights back. Javert, now a police inspector in Montreuil-sur-Mer, arrives to arrest her, ignoring all her pleas for mercy. Valjean intervenes, recognizing Fantine from his factory. He takes her to a hospital and promises to care for her daughter. Fantine, delirious and on the brink of demise, believes she sees her daughter one last time. As she perishes, Valjean pledges to find and protect Cosette, a vow made out of deep compassion and guilt for his indirect role in her suffering. Meanwhile, Javert's suspicion of the mayor's true identity grows stronger. He confronts Valjean with news that another man has been identified as the lost prisoner and is about to be tried. Valjean now finds himself at a crossroads. Would he stay quiet and let this unknown man who has been mistaken for him take his place? Or would he do what he is morally obliged to and tell the truth, revealing his true identity? Valjean has come a long way now. He's mayor and owner of a factory with hundreds of workers. He has a lot to lose now more than ever. He needs his freedom now more than ever. After much soul-searching, Valjean decides to reveal his true identity. He goes to the courtroom, where the innocent man is being tried, and declares that he is the real Jean Valjean. He admits to being prisoner 24601 and proceeds to plead for the innocent man's release. This revelation shocks the courtroom and Javert, who now has undeniable proof of Valjean's identity. Valjean is confronted by the inspector who so desperately wants to lock him away. Valjean pleads that he may just fulfill his promise to the just passed Fantine and find her daughter and bring her to safety. However, Javert wants Valjean's blood. They not only exchange heated words but throw swords across each other's faces. In the heat of it all, Javert reveals that he was born in jail and was from the gutter just like him. Catching the inspector in a short moment of vulnerability, Valjean flees and jumps into the waters in a quest to fulfill his promise to Fantine. Valjean travels to the Thénardier's inn, where Cosette, a frail and child, is living. Cosette is sent on an errand out in the cold dark. The terrified child, while lifting her bucket of water, sees a man approaching and flees to hide behind a tree. It's Valjean. In sympathy, Valjean tries to reassure the child that he means no harm. When she's at ease a little, Valjean inquires her name. He is utterly stumped to realize that she is, after all, Cosette, the one he seeks. Valjean leads Cosette back to the home of the Thénardier. He reveals his disappointment at finding such a young child all by herself in the woods. He is willing to clear up any debt, whatever the price may be, to take Cosette with him. Valjean further reveals to Cosette that her mother has passed away. Though initially proving hesitant, with the Thénardier putting up a charade of caring for Cosette and labeling her as priceless, they eventually agree to let Cosette go, for a fee however, and Valjean pays the price. He takes her with him, taking up the role of her father and promising her a better life. Just as Cosette and Valjean leave the home of the Thénardier, Javert arrives. However, not in time, as he doesn't meet Valjean or Cosette. Javert asks about the couple and the whereabouts of Cosette and Valjean, but they're oblivious to that knowledge. On a carriage, as Valjean and Cosette travel, a desperate Javert is out on a search, demanding the papers of travelers. Valjean knows there's no other option but to make a run for it. So he grabs Cosette and they run, but Javert spots them and runs after them on his horse. Valjean manages to hide himself and Cosette from Javert, and just in a moment of despair, Valjean comes across the man whom he had helped when he fell under his cart some time ago. The man, who feels forever indebted to his mayor, would gladly be of assistance to him in any way he can. On the other hand, Javert, in a dramatic monologue, pledges that he will never rest until he sees Valjean behind bars. His unwavering commitment to the law and relentless pursuit of Valjean is visible. In the meantime, Valjean and Cosette flee to Paris, where they build a new life together. 9 years later, in 1832 in Paris, the city is teetering on the brink of revolution. Students, led by Enjolras and Marius Pontmercy, plan an uprising against the oppressive monarchy. Marius, a passionate idealist, comes from a wealthy family, yet he actively fights against the injustices that prevail and does not let his status and wealth overwhelm him. Éponine, now a young woman, secretly loves Marius. The Thénardier cross paths with Valjean in the marketplace as they lure him to beg for money. Just then, they recognize the monsieur. They are upset with him and feel they let Cosette go to him too easily and too cheaply and begin to hurt Valjean. Just then, Éponine, their daughter, announces that the police are on their way, and they should make a run for it. Not just any police, Javert. The sound of the name Javert is triggering to Valjean, and more than anyone, Valjean flees. He grabs Cosette by the arm and they make a run for it. Though it's been 9 years, Javert hasn't gotten over his hate for Valjean and his immense desire to see him locked up behind bars. A short chat between him and the Thénardier reveals that the man was indeed who he thought. Soon Éponine remembers who Cosette is. Éponine is shocked by the fact that the very Cosette whom she spent a short period of her childhood with, who was at the mercy of her parents, now looks all pretty and glamorous, while she and her parents live on the streets. While Éponine wanders in thought, Marius approaches her. He's curious about the mysterious lady whom he couldn't get his eyes off all through. Marius wants Éponine to get as much information as she can on this mystery lady. He's willing to pay Éponine for the trouble. However, Éponine wants more than the money he has, or is willing to offer. She realizes his feelings for Cosette and decides to help him despite her own heartbreak. She sings, expressing her unrequited love and yearning for a different life. The battle is soon approaching, and the group of students preps for it. Having been fed up with the oppression they have faced all their lives, they charge themselves up, in need of a revolution. On the other hand, Cosette lies in her room, wondering about the possibility of one falling in love so quickly and instantly. Cosette yearns to see the world for herself, to experience the entirety of this strange love she feels for Marius. Cosette wonders if the feeling is mutual between them. Could she be deluded to think that Marius feels the same way she does? Does he love her in the same manner? These questions she desperately needs answers to. Valjean, who has been eavesdropping all along, feels nothing but empathy for his daughter. He understands. She has been lonely and alone all her life, and it's normal for her to want more than him for company. As emotions fill the room, Cosette wants to know more about the man whom she calls father. The man who speaks so very little is secretive and is running away from his past. However, Valjean would rather not have the conversation. Meanwhile, Éponine, who is taking Marius to Cosette, is stuck listening to him sing about his mystery lady. Though Éponine finds joy in his joy, she wishes to be his. Just then, they arrive at the place and the man sees Cosette arrive. The boy's eyes light up with desire. A heartwarming feeling fills them both as they stare into each other's eyes deeply. Éponine, who made it all happen, watches from a close distance. The gentleman makes no haste to introduce himself to his mademoiselle as Marius Pontmercy. The lady in return presents herself as Cosette. Though separated by a gate in the garden, nothing seems to hinder their love. The two lovers gaze into each other's eyes and express their heartfelt feelings. Just then, Valjean finds his daughter wandering outside. Marius runs into hiding as Cosette leaves to answer to Valjean. She leaves her napkin behind, and a sentimental Marius picks it up and takes it with him as he leaves. As Marius leaves, Thénardier arrives. Éponine tries to stop her father from invading the home of the little family. She threatens to scream if her father makes another move, and she does scream, drawing the attention of Valjean. At the sound of that scream, a paranoid Valjean feels his cover has been blown and has been found by Javert. He feels the instant need to take Cosette away and hide together. Valjean rushes to Cosette and tells her they need to flee. However, the young girl who has just found love does not like the sound of that. Valjean is all about their safety, but Cosette wants to stay, knowing that she probably might not have much time left there any longer. Cosette rushes to the gate of the garden and drops a handwritten letter there. The letter meets Éponine, who hasn't left since and is still lurking in the shadows. A despaired Éponine walks in the rain, hurt and expressing her feelings of loneliness. To her, Marius and she would only ever exist in her mind. They would never be together, as he is in love with another person. Valjean and Cosette are in a carriage as they attempt to flee. Marius realizes their departure and is left in dismay. As revolutionary fervor sweeps through Paris, the students build a barricade in the streets, preparing for battle. Javert infiltrates the barricade, pretending to be a supporter, but his true identity is quickly discovered by the revolutionaries. He is captured and brought before the revolutionaries, who debate his fate. The revolutionaries brace themselves for the impending battle. Éponine, disguised as a boy, sacrifices herself to save Marius during the skirmish. She delivers a letter for Marius from Cosette before expiring in his arms. As she perishes, she expresses her unrequited love. She's in his arms, all she had ever desired. Marius mourns the loss of his loyal friend. Marius's letter is delivered to Valjean, all to Valjean's dismay, as he had feared a moment like this, a moment when a man would desire Cosette's hand in marriage. Now, Marius becomes Valjean's priority, so he decides to participate in the war. Amidst the chaos, Valjean comes face to face with the inspector, who has become the revolutionary's slave. How ironic. Javert is at the mercy of the people, tightly wrapped around his neck, and bruises on his face. Valjean asks to have Javert all to himself, and so Enjolras hands him a gun to end the inspector, and they leave the two alone in private, though they still stealthily observe Valjean and Javert from outside. In a charade, Valjean walks up to Javert. Having a fierce look in his eyes, he grabs him and pulls him out of the room. He leads Javert outside, holding a knife in his hands. Javert appears to be unmoved, as he had anticipated that from Valjean. To his surprise, Javert is cut loose by Valjean, and he instructs him to flee. This mere act is unfathomable for Javert. He can't comprehend how Valjean would decline such a golden opportunity to take his life. Javert knows that he has always been a tyrant to Valjean, and now that he is at his mercy, Valjean refuses to take his life. None of this makes sense to Javert. Valjean forgives Javert, and holds nothing against him anymore. He lets him go, and he shows Javert mercy, just like the bishop did to him many years ago. As Javert runs, Valjean shoots at a wall to create an impression that he has murdered Javert. The gunshot is loud and it draws the attention of everyone, but Javert disappears into the shadows. Valjean returns back to the group, with a reassuring look on his face that he had murdered Javert. Soon after, they all share a bottle of beer, and irrespective of what the future holds, they will forever be brothers. Meanwhile, Marius is in despair as he feels he has lost his dear Cosette for eternity. Valjean watches the young man in sorrow and says a prayer for him, hoping he finds peace, and wishes him a sound mind. Valjean tries to bargain with God to take him instead, for he is old and has lived out his youth already. He wants God to let Marius live, for he is only a boy and still in his youth. The battle at the barricade is fierce and chaotic. The revolutionaries are outnumbered and overwhelmed. Enjolras and his comrades make a valiant last stand, but they are ultimately killed. Marius is severely wounded, and Valjean carries him through the sewers to safety, determined to save him for Cosette's sake. Valjean and the unconscious Marius navigate the filthy, treacherous sewers. They encounter Thénardier, who is looting the bodies of the deceased. Valjean bribes him to let them pass, and they continue their escape. Emerging from the sewers, they are confronted by Javert, who has been pursuing them relentlessly. However, Javert is deeply troubled by the kindness Valjean has shown him earlier. This act of mercy clashes with Javert's strict belief in the law. Javert finds himself unable to deal with this conflict inside him. Instead of arresting them, he decides to let Valjean and Marius go free. Still tormented by his inner struggle, Javert feels he cannot continue living. He ultimately decides to end by jumping into the river Seine. The next morning, Marius wakes up to find his grandfather tending to him. Over the next few weeks, Marius slowly recovers from his wounds. He often thinks about the battle at the barricade and the friends he lost. These memories haunt him, and he struggles with feelings of guilt and sadness. Despite his physical recovery, the emotional scars take longer to heal. Marius does not know that it was Valjean who saved him from a certain demise. He has no idea that Valjean carried him through the dangerous sewers and brought him to safety. Marius's family and friends believe he was simply found and rescued by chance. Jean Valjean, sensing that he is close to the end, decides to disappear from Cosette's life to ensure her happiness with Marius. He reveals his past to Marius and asks him to be discreet in their conversation and take care of Cosette. Cosette is heartbroken that Valjean has disappeared without a word to her. Marius tries to comfort her with his presence. Her father may be gone, but he is here to stay. Marius and Cosette get married in a beautiful and grand ceremony. While everyone is celebrating, the Thénardier come to the wedding, even though they weren't invited. They try to blackmail Marius by claiming they have proof that Cosette's father, Jean Valjean, is a criminal. Monsieur Thénardier claims to have seen Valjean in the sewers, taking out the corpse of a boy he had murdered the night of the war. He says Valjean bribed him with jewelry to not speak of what he had seen. When Thénardier shows Marius the jewel, he finds that it's his ring. Then, Marius realizes that it was Valjean who had saved him that night. Marius quickly realizes the Thénardier's schemes and desperation for money. Now he knows that Jean Valjean has been nothing but a kind man, who has done many brave and selfless things, and he recognizes Valjean's true character as a hero. In agitation of the Thénardier's persistence, Marius punches the man and demands for the whereabouts of Valjean, since he claimed to know. When he reveals it, Marius kicks the couple out and grabs his Cosette by her arm as they quickly exit the premises. Marius and Cosette rush to Valjean's side at the convent. They find him weak and expiring, but at peace. Valjean is comforted by their presence and the knowledge that Cosette is loved and protected. Marius is full of gratitude to him for saving his life, and he reveals to Cosette in detail what Valjean had done for him, as he single-handedly united the couple. Cosette is speechless by this revelation. Emotions fly high in the room as everyone is in tears. Tears of joy, gratitude, tears of peace. Valjean believes he can now perish in peace, as Cosette is by his side. However, an optimistic Cosette believes he can live, and that it's too soon to say goodbye. He gives in to her optimism and hands her a note, instructing her to read it when he eventually perishes. He calls it a story of a man who turned from hating to learning how to love. In his final moments, Valjean is visited by the spirits of Fantine and the bishop, who welcome him into eternal peace. He expires content, having found redemption and fulfilled his promise to Fantine. The film closes with a vision of Valjean joining a throng of revolutionaries on a heavenly barricade, singing of freedom and justice. And so, Jean Valjean's journey from despair to redemption ends, leaving a legacy of compassion, sacrifice, and hope.